of Shabbat Night Live. We had to cut our story off right before we went to the break. Nehemiah, please continue with this story of how this scroll and the reed markings, the dry
dots, right?
Yeah.
So it's full of these dry dots, and I'll actually come back to that in a minute. But during the break, Keith mentioned something to me that I think is worth talking about. What we can see here, this photo I took on the computer. This is from the same scroll that's right here in front of us, and here we saw this before. It's the word hachaya written over an erasure. And I've been traveling around the world looking at Torah scrolls and codices and all kinds of Hebrew manuscripts. This device here, this dynolite that does 50x, ultraviolet, infrared, and visible light, I've used this now on the Aleppo Codex, the Leningrad Codex, the manuscript called Sassoon 1053, which is in Geneva, Switzerland now.
That's three.
And I have used it on the Damascus Crown, which is at the National Library of Israel. That's 4 of the 6 key manuscripts. And why did I do it? For a number of reasons. One of the reasons is I was told by the critics that, my argument, and I presented this in my book, Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence, based on what I knew at the time. My argument was that in certain places in the Aleppo Codex, the scribe made a mistake, and he put in the full vowels, even though it was not his intention to put in the full vowels. Mm-hmm. How do I know it wasn't his intention? Because in most places he didn't put in the full vowels. And therefore, whenever he put it in, that was a mistake. This book, Shattering Conspiracy of Silence, has now been translated into Spanish. Rompiendo la conspiración del silencio. And I'm reminded of one of my favorite movies, The Frisco Kid. Mm-hmm. In The Frisco Kid, it's a story about a Jewish rabbi who's taking a Torah scroll from Lithuania across the United States to San Francisco, and he literally misses the boat to San Francisco from New York, and so he travels across the Old West with Harrison Ford. And as he's traveling across the Old West, he and his companion are abducted by Native Americans, by Indians, and the Indian chief holds up the Torah scroll, and he says, "I read this entire book," he says to his followers, his community, and he turns to one of the people, he says, "Didn't understand a single word." That's the case for me in Rompiendo la conspiración del silencio. Didn't understand a single word, but I'm told it's a good translation. So in that book, I present, both in English and Spanish apparently, I present the argument that the scribe accidentally put in the full vowels. When I wrote that book, I knew about the Aleppo Codex, I knew about the Leningrad Codex, and I believe by then we knew about the Cairo Codex of the Prophets. We didn't know about the Damascus Crown, if memory serves me. Over a number, something like 15 years, I don't remember exactly. Mm-hmm. About 15 years, I had found 5 manuscripts that had the full vowels. Those 3 plus the Damascus Crown, and then eventually Hebrew Union College #1. And I was told, no, it's not possible, Nehemiah. Scribes never made mistake with God's name, and if they did, they would have to resolve that in 30 days, and you would never see it. If you found it, that meant it wasn't actually a mistake that was made. Mm. And I did a study called The Mistake That Got It Right. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to continue the research. And that's why one of the reasons I traveled around the world to look at these manuscripts. Mm-hmm. And I found there isn't a single manuscript that doesn't have some kind of mistake. If it was written by humans, it's got a mistake, and hopefully the mistake was corrected. I was actually having this conversation with somebody who was helping me out, and he was looking through one of the manuscripts, and he said, "Wow, this is a pristine manuscript. There's no mistakes." I said, "How do you know there's no mistakes?" He said, "Well, there's nothing scratched out." I said, "That just means they didn't find the mistakes." It doesn't mean there's no mistakes. It just means they didn't catch the mistakes. The mistakes are probably still there if we look for them. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for things that involve God's name. And one of the things that I was told is that they never erased the vowels or accents of God's name in the Aleppo Codex. That turned out not to be true. And in fact, not only did they erase the accents and vowels of God's name, they actually erased the consonants of God's name. Oh, wow. Which is completely contrary to rabbinical law, but they did it. And how do I know they did it? I found all kinds of evidence, and one of the types of evidence was this microscope. I was able to examine it with the microscope and see, okay, there's no question in at least one of these instances, that the remnants of the letters Yud Hey Vav Hey are still there. Mm-hmm. And so it was clear to me in the Aleppo Codex and in another codex, the Sassoon 1053, it was irrefutable that they erased God's name because they left the top half of the letters. They only erased the bottom half, right? So anybody could see that they erased God's name. So what I learned and what I had suspected is they may have all kinds of rules that are set down by the scribes, but when the scribe is sitting in his workshop and just a single column might be 2 or 3 days' work, a sheet is a work of a week.
Wow.
He comes to a mistake and he has to think really hard. What do I do here? Right? I have to feed my kids. I'm not going to violate rabbinical law, but is that a law or is it a suggestion? Is it a tradition or is it a commandment? And there are some instances where they stretch the letter of the law or the letter of the rabbinical laws in order to fit some practical realities, right? What do we do in this situation? And there are all kinds of things like that.
So one of the things that happened, Scott, was we were doing episode 15 of Hebrew Gospel Pearls. And as we were doing episode 15 of Hebrew Gospel Pearls, this was a game changer for me. In fact, it literally stopped everything. We were doing Hebrew Gospel Pearls, and we're talking about what happens with the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. And Nehemiah says, you know what? I know of an example where we see this in one of these big six, one that people don't see.
Big six manuscripts of the Tanaj, of the Old Testament. Okay.
So he goes right on, we're doing this. You got to watch Hebrew Gospel Pearls 15. He goes right onto his computer. This computer's got everything on it.
Same computer, yeah.
And he goes to this manuscript. We wouldn't even see this manuscript. I mean, you could tell the story, but I can't let you tell the story.
Can I tell the story?
Well, you got to tell the story, I guess.
So this is one of the big six. 4 of the big 6 manuscripts of the Tanaj. Aleppo Codex, Leningrad Codex, let's see here, Damascus Crown, Oriental 4445 at the British Library, Cairo Codex of the Prophets, and Sassoon 1053. Those are the 6 key manuscripts of the Tanakh in Hebrew. When scholars are studying what is in the Masoretic text, they look to those manuscripts. And they look to others, but those are the 6 key ones that scholars have looked to. And 4 of those are in the hands of public institutions, the British Library, the National Library of Israel, the Russian National Library, and I'm missing one right here. I forget where the 4th one is. In any event, 2 of them are not in the hands of public institutions. One of them, we don't know where it is. That's the Cairo Codex of the Prophets. Maybe it's in Cairo, maybe it isn't. The 6th one is the only one of the 6 that's in the hands of a private collection. And it was a man named Jacques-E Safra. I may be mispronouncing his name. I apologize. He's a very interesting man. I've met him. Very, very nice man. Very intelligent man. And he lives in Switzerland. And he comes from a very well-known Jewish family, very respected Jewish family. Just to give you an idea, the there's 2 campuses of the Hebrew University, Mount Scopus and Givat Ram. The Givat Ram campus is named after his uncle, the Edmund J. Safra campus. Right? So this is the nephew. And I've been looking for this codex for years. Every time I meet someone who I think might have some connection to this person, I say, do you know Mr. Safra? Do you know Mr. Safra? No, I don't know him. Oh, I know his uncle. No, I don't know him. And for years, I'm trying to find this manuscript. I know it's in Geneva, Switzerland, or I believe it's in Geneva, Switzerland. But look, the Russian National Library, I send them an email, right? Or I ask someone who speaks Russian to talk to them. How do you contact a private collector, right? Who isn't exactly in the phone book? He's a billionaire, as far as I understand. They're not the most accessible people. So how do you get access to this? Well, I end up getting contacted by somebody who says, I'm going to study Sassoon 1053. Would you come with me? Out of the blue.
He doesn't tell the story well.
There's more to it than that. But we're running out of time.
No. I'm going to stop you for a second. The person says, hey, listen, you've got this.
So I've been sending this person photos taken with this microscope, specifically from the Leningrad Codex.
And Nehemiah is smart enough. He says, hey, can I borrow that? He said, no, you can't borrow it, but I can come with you.
Well, he said, can you either come with or can you lend it to me? I'm like, no, you can't borrow it. I'll be there.
So this is Sassoon 1053, which he brought in episode 15. When I see this, Scott, what happens in Sassoon 53? The scribe literally does what?
So he makes a mistake where he copies a verse twice, and then he realizes, okay, I can't leave a blank space because the blank spaces have significance. They could be the end of a thought and the beginning of a new thought. So he said, instead, I'm going to erase the bottom half of all the letters, including the name Yehovah.
Now, Scott.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Torah scroll, the name of God, all of these things that are going on. When this happens for me, something in my spirit stopped again. And I said to myself, okay, so what can we do to help people? People out there that say the name of God, okay, I can't get all of the, this part of it or that part of it. There's some simplicity to it also. And what I've appreciated, both from Michael and from Nehemiah for the last 15 or 20 years, is we've done so many things that can give people a chance to see the name of God, what I call pure and simple. So what I did is I took all of that information, and here's the radical part, I made it for free. The name of God, pure and simple, I put it all into one hyperlink PDF for people. They will see Nehemiah do something on Exodus 3:14. They'll see Michael and Nehemiah talking about the issue of Yah. I mean, that was a powerful statement, a powerful presentation. Presentation after presentation, webinar after webinar after webinar.
Yeah.
It's all available. The name of God, pure and simple, at bfainternational.com, front page. They click it, it's free, it's for them. I wanted to say that because I have found that there are people all over the world, and you just talked about it, people who have now gotten the name and they're saying, man, I want to know more, I want to understand more, and for me, it all fits back to this. God's time, Shavuot. God's Torah. How many times have we taught about Torah? God's tetragrammaton, his name. The first time Nehemiah unrolls it, the second time, it's the name. Now, there's some other stuff in here. And hopefully we can share some more. I mean, I don't want to keep this going, but there's so much stuff in here that's
So I want you to understand why I bothered to travel all around the world, both before COVID and a little bit after COVID, even I've traveled a little bit as well, as much as I could to examine these scrolls and codexes. So I was told things by some of the critics of this book, right? Of shattering the conspiracy of silence and the things that I've argued over the years. And one of the things they said is, well, no, that if they made a mistake with God's name, they would take a razor and they would cut it out of the scroll.
Completely.
They would cut it out of the codex. So if there was a mistake in the Aleppo Codex, they would cut it out. Well, my question was, okay, where'd you get that information from? And I ended up contacting the top scholar in the world on this subject. And he said, yes, I've seen them cut out from Torah scrolls, God's name, when a mistake was made. And then he stated the obvious. That would never be done in a codex because there's writing on the other side. Oh, that's a good point. Okay. So you couldn't. Yeah, you could. And I actually did find one a printed book where they cut it out, but that's a special case. By and large, you would not cut things out of a codex if you were using it to read. There's one example, for example, that I found where they were using the parchment. They were reusing it to reinforce another book, and it had the name Yehovah all over it. So the scribe went around and cut out the name Yehovah from a codex of the prophets, but not so he could read from it and study from it, but so that he could use it and it wouldn't have God's name in it and have that sacredness. He wasn't supposed to do that either, by the way. That's also against rabbinical law, but he did it. But he wasn't going to do it with the name Yehovah. But it couldn't be done in the Aleppo Codex, because if you did it in the Aleppo Codex, well, then you've cut out something from the other side, right? Well, that's kind of logical. Yeah. So I'm the kind of person who I'm told by the top expert in the world, yes, I've seen it. And I literally said to this person, I said, well, can you tell me what those scrolls were? I'll fly anywhere in the world, this was before COVID, to go see those. He said, I don't remember. I've been looking at scrolls for 40 years. I'm like, okay, fine. I better go look at the scrolls myself. And I traveled to all the major libraries around the world. And I did find manuscripts where they cut out God's name. But not from a codex. It would never be done from a codex, except that special case where they're no longer reading from it, right? Exactly. Certainly not one that's being read from. Not to fix a mistake. It would be done to remove the sacredness from the parchment if you were going to reuse the parchment. So, and look, I've said to people, I was born in Chicago, lived about half of my life in Israel, but in my heart, I'm from Missouri, the show me state. And I needed to see this for myself, and I'm glad I did. I learned all kinds of things. I learned a lot. I learned that there were situations that I was wrong about. One of the things I was wrong about is that I was told, I said this before, that they never erased a vowel or accent of God's name in the Aleppo Codex. And not only did they erase that, they erased the actual consonants. Okay, well now I've corrected the record on multiple occasions. I thought something, I was told something. I remember saying though, in my defense, I wish I could see it for myself. And when I went to see it for myself, I saw that what I was told was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So going
Yeah.
and seeing it for yourself is the key, and examining it with the tools that we have.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more and more things we're going to find. I mean, your first discovery that's made it out there like crazy is the how many thousands of vowel points in the name of God we see
and that's
now.
an interesting point. I've had people say, well, how many times have you found God's name with the full vowels? Well, I couldn't even tell you how many. Like, take, for example, the Damascus crown, which is from the 10th century. It's one of the earliest pointed, meaning it has vowels, Bible codexes that we have in the world. And almost on every page it has Yehovah with the full vowels. It's the entire Torah. And I don't know what that number is, but it's something like 1,500 times, right? I haven't counted the exact number, but it's almost on every page. It's over 1,000 times, that's for sure. In other ones, for example, the Aleppo Codex, there's 8 places that it has the full vowels. 2 of those you might be able to argue are from a later scribe. 6 are original. So there it's a very relatively limited number. Other ones, it's I forget the number in the Leningrad Codex, but somewhere in the 40s or 50s. So it varies based on the manuscript. But if you take the number of manuscripts, or at least shelf marks, right? It's hard to count manuscripts. A lot of times we have these fragments, and we don't know how those fragments connect to other fragments. We don't know, is that part of the same codex, or are they from 2 different codices? But if you count all the shelf marks, I've found over 2,400 with the full vowels.
Wow.
And years ago, I did a teaching, and somebody said to me, okay, you found, I think it was 10 or 50 or something. They said, when will you stop? I said, why would I ever stop? And now I can tell you I've stopped. And the reason I've stopped is I ran out of manuscripts. I've looked at not all the Hebrew Bible manuscripts with vowels, but all the ones that are currently available to me. I do plan in the future to do some more traveling to photograph more of these codices that haven't been digitized and look for more with vowels. But for now, I'm pretty much out of material for what's available to me.
So go back. We find this Torah scroll.
Yeah.
We're with Michael. We're with Nehemiah. One of the things that I say in this book is Hallowed Name Revealed Again is that eventually the scholars are going to catch up. But we're going to need something to happen. And I think it's happened. And what's happened? We have a scholar who's gone way beyond what we first started with all that time. But what's really powerful to me, Scott, is that the first information is still good today. That information on the name of God is still good today. And Nehemiah, I have to tell you, thank you, not only for step 1, Leviticus chapter 23, but for step 2, Leviticus chapter 24, where we open up and see the name of God right here. I mean, and there's more. There's more in this scroll. And like I said, I would love to sit with Michael and go over this scroll because I think he's significant in this whole process. I am thankful to him. I'm thankful to you all. I'm thankful that we're in here. We had no idea we were going to be here, but you guys are never going to let us out of the studio. Are you? Are we ever going to get out of here? I mean,
I think I have chains on my legs.
Like we said in the very beginning, the Word of God is living and active,
Amen.
sharper than any two-edged sword, and we're proving it here. Even though these scrolls are way before the technology that you have on the desk here today, we're finding more and more, and as technology increases, we'll keep going back to these things, and we'll keep finding more. It will never end.
There's incredible things, Scott, where they've taken things that were erased in Torah scrolls and used something called multispectral imaging. And they're able to read completely the erased words.
Wow.
Now that costs a lot of money at this point. The technology the price hasn't come down. So I'm not quite there yet. I can only afford this thing that costs about $700.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the price comes down, will you come back? We'll look at it again. And until then,
may it be.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here with us. This is a very exciting series. Like I said, I think we're going to do more because as technology increases, we're going to see more and more stuff. So thank you again for joining us. All right, and thank you for joining us for Shabbat Night Live. This concludes this series, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And until we see you next week for Shabbat Night Live, Shavua Tov. Have a good week.